Hi, welcome to episode 161 of The Corner of Knit and Tea. I'm Laura, also known as Fluffy K on Ravelry, Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Twitter. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, and that's where this episode and every episode show notes will be. I have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Knit and Tea, where I sell my handspun yarns. And we have a Ravelry group called The Corner of Knit and Tea. We are currently working on our gift along, which is our annual craft along. All crafts are welcome for those gifts that you are knitting for holiday gifts. It began on November 1st. One more time. Began on November 1st and will conclude on December 31st. And anything that you craft that is for someone other than yourself, really not having fun here, everything that you craft that is for someone other than yourself is eligible for a prize. I have some beautiful prizes picked out, some fiber, some yarn, and it is a little way to get an entry into a prize drawing for something that you're doing anyway. So it is something that I do every year. If you are interested, check it out in the Ravelry group. Hello, how are you? I hope that you are doing well. It feels like forever since we have talked. It is Sunday, December 3rd, and I believe it has been 3 weeks since my last podcast, and for that I apologize. As you can tell, I have been a little bit under the weather, and I will discuss more about that in a minute. I hope that you are doing well. I'm sorry that there hasn't been a podcast. Where we left off was the weekend before I left for Thanksgiving. My husband and I always make a trip to California for Thanksgiving to see my family. That's where I'm from, and my parents still live there. My sister and her husband and the kids do as well. And so Wes and I chose to drive this year out there. A couple of years ago we took the train, but usually we like driving. And we take about 10 days to do it, and so we stop along the way and see interesting things. And this year's most interesting thing on the way out was we stopped in Winslow, Arizona. And Winslow, there's not much there. It's between the Painted Desert and Flagstaff on Highway 40. And we decided to stop in Winslow because my parents had told us about this great old hotel that's there. And as you know, Route 66 went through there, and you can tell from the old song. And also the Burlington North Santa Fe Railroad went through there. And the Amtrak does today, but back in the day it was the Burlington North Santa Fe. And what there is to see in Winslow is a beautiful historic hotel called La Posada. And it was one of the Fred Harvey hotels and restaurants. Back in the day on the Burlington North Santa Fe, they did not have dining cars. And so they would stop in cities for an hour or two for people to get out and have a meal. And Fred Harvey bought up properties all along the Burlington North Santa Fe and created all of these restaurants and cocktail lounges and then occasionally hotels where people could stay and eat. And at least La Posada enjoyed a famous clientele. It was a place for the rich and famous of Hollywood to go. And so they have pictures of all these stars who were there in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And now it has been revamped slightly. It is a hotel. The dining room is still open. I believe an architect and his wife own it, so it is full of all kinds of, the wife is an artist, I should say. She is a political artist, so all kinds of interesting artwork, and then they feature local artwork as well. Baskets and rugs and photography and dream catchers and pottery. And then the whole place is full of all of these places, all of these couches and chairs and fireplaces and bookcases. And so we were in there for an afternoon and evening. We wandered all the art galleries. We had a delicious dinner in the dining room. We spent the night, and then we curled up by the fireplace and read for a few hours as well. So it was just a beautiful place to go if you are ever in the southwest of the United States and driving and can spare an afternoon and evening. I would highly recommend La Posada Hotel in Winslow, Arizona. So the remainder of the week was, it took us a couple days to drive out, and then we spent 4 days in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, almost as soon as we arrived, Wes got sick with a cold, and he actually ran a fever one of the days and had to stay in the hotel, which was a total bummer. The rest of the time we spent with my family and the kids, and cooking and sharing, and my mom had us go through a bunch of different things from my grandparents, so I got some old photographs and a piece of jewelry that was my grandmother's, and I also have recently gotten interested in fountain pens, and so my dad and I looked at his collection, and he had some from my grandparents, so that was really fun as well. And then on Friday evening, we began the drive back to Kansas City, and unfortunately I got sick on the way home, and I feel much better now, but as you can tell, I still sound a little bit off. So we drove home and we took Monday off of work, and then it was a short week, but lots to catch up on and end of the year stuff at work. And that kind of brings me to today. So let's get into the podcast because I have a ton of knitting to show you, and even some spinning, and I'll talk about some of the other projects that I'm working on and things that are coming up. So let's get into it. I almost forget how to do this. Today's tea is Downton Abbey, the Christmas blend. Since it is December now, it seems like an appropriate time. This is a black tea with mulling spices from the label. Let's see. Black tea, cinnamon, cloves, licorice root, and apple bits. So that is what I've got here, and I am drinking it in my Downton Abbey mug, which I love. It just felt appropriate. So maybe I'll rewatch some of the Christmas specials from Downton Abbey at some point in the next few weeks. But here we go. So my knits on the trip were full of up and downs. The most important project, or the biggest priority project that I was working on, was my sweater for Nanny Swaymo, and unfortunately it is no more. I got almost all the way done with it. I really was getting close to where I was going to put the hem on, and I decided to try it on, and I found that the fit was not flattering. I decided to knit at tunic length, which was not terribly flattering for me. At this point, I usually try and camouflage my middle a little bit, and it did nothing to do that. It was kind of clingy, and so it emphasized that. I could have ripped back and just made it a regular length sweater, but the neckline was really big, and so I would have had to do something about that. And as I suspected, the gray color kind of made me look dead, and I don't know if I've said this before, so my husband doesn't often say a lot about the things that I knit. I mean, he'll tell me if he thinks something is nice, but more importantly, he will speak up if something that I'm making is not looking right. And he doesn't do it in a mean way. I'm not saying this to make him the villain. Normally he'll tell me if he thinks that something is not flattering or is not looking good, and I could just tell. I tried it on in a hotel room, and I went in to look in the mirror, and he was standing there, and I could just tell by the way he was looking at me that he didn't think it was a good idea. And I was a little rash, I suppose. I probably should have slept on it, but I just went ahead and pulled the whole thing out. So it's all back to yarn now. I don't know what I will do with it. I have a couple other sweater ideas where I might work a different color collar. Ultimately, I had decided not to do that, but I have a couple other pattern ideas where it would be a little less form-fitting, and I could work in some other colors. So to be continued on that one, we will have to we'll have to see. So the next big thing that I was working on that I finished was my exploration station. And that is by Stephen West, and I decided that I did not want to knit the pattern as written, and I think I spoke about that previously. I wanted to make it wedges, and I decided that, or I guess originally it started because I wanted to make it bigger, so I wanted to add extra wedges, and I went ahead and did the whole thing as wedges. Excuse me, I am still like congested, and I apologize because I always hate listening to it in other podcasts. But I did not want to skip podcasting, so we're going to still try and do this today. This is my Stephen West exploration station. I got to wedge 11, where I ran out on the blue and ended up finishing with the dark charcoal gray, and I decided not to do any more, so it is enormous. I actually did not block it because it is garter stitch, and I really liked the squishy garter stitch unblocked, and it was of a sufficient size that I did not think it needed a blocking. So I have already worn this week. I absolutely love this. To recap, the shawl is Exploration Station by Stephen West. I used a US size 6 needle. My yarns were the light gray, the charcoal gray, and the pink were from Pigeon Roof Studios. They were jumbo skeins that she got rid of in what she called her oddments sales, which is she puts up one-of-a-kind things. And the blue is a beautiful yarn from Treasure Goddess Yarns. She has Treasure Goddess Yarns on Etsy, and it is her sock yarn, which is super squishy, and the blue is called Kiss from a Mermaid. The other colorways do not have names. Like I said, they were just some leftover skeins that were put up kind of in a one-of-a-kind. So in sum total, I used about 1,500 yards on this shawl. I was pleased to use the yardage. I still have, I have none of the blue left over. I still have some of the pink and the grays, and I don't know what I will do with them. It is 100% superwash merino, so I would not use it for socks or anything like that. I might use them as flourishes in another shawl, but this is a little bit neon and not usually me, but I love it. So that is my exploration station finished. And I will say that I've had a couple of you ask me about the wedges. If you purchase the pattern from Stephen West, you will see that there is sort of a rhyme and reason to how the wedges are set up. Things kind of grow in order. I don't want to give away the secret sauce of the pattern. The wedges should be relatively easy for you to add onto if you are interested. However, I do have my notes, so if you purchase the pattern and have trouble figuring out how to add extra wedges, you are welcome to ask me, but you will need to have the pattern because I won't be able to, everything I will say about it will be straight from the pattern. So that is one down and done. I took a million projects with me on the road, and some of them are gone already, so you will not be able to see them. One of the other things that I finished on vacation was I took a bunch of pairs of socks for, or I tried to knit a bunch of pairs of socks for Roxy. One of the pairs I already finished. It was the Knit Picks Felici pair in Fanciful. She already has those. This set I finished on the way home. This is the West Yorkshire Spinners. It's their standard sock yarn, and it was in the birds colorways. This is the peacock. I have a pair of socks in this colorway, and now Miss Roxy does too. I need to send these to her. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to do, I think I'm going to do one more pair and then send them to her. So I did finish a set of socks for her. I did not even start a set of socks for me. I brought along some handspun yarn, and I also need to pull out, I have a skein of Christmas yarn, although I might do that as my Christmas Eve cast on. And actually my thought was my Christmas yarn will probably be enough that I can do a pair for myself and a pair for Roxy. So my thought, and it's green and it's got like all kinds of other colors in it, but I think it'll be fine even for after Christmas. So my thought was maybe I'd do one more pair and then send these to her. So that's another one that I got done. Before I left, when I was working on the sweater, I had pulled out all of those purples to try and decide what I wanted to do, and one of those purples was already pre-wound, and I decided that I wanted to do something with it, potentially even to wear with the sweater, because I decided that ultimately I didn't want to put the colors on the sweater itself, but I thought, oh, I could make a cowl and wear it with the sweater, and that might help with the... Anyway. One of the colors that I showed you was that electric orchid. I believe actually it's called deep orchid. I've been calling it electric orchid because it is just so amazingly bright. And it is from Rock and String Creations. And I found a pattern that was like just about right for the yardage, and I do have, my ends are still not woven in. I have two ends and they are not woven in, so of course they'll stick out. This is the Rochambeau Colette, and I think the monitor is not doing quite justice to the to the colorway, it is just this electric kind of purple, and the Rochambeau Colette is by Karina Spencer, and it calls for either a skein of worsted weight yarn for kind of the large plush size, or a skein of sport weight yarn for the more delicate size. Mine was sport weight, and this is another one of those great cowls that I love. They're cowlettes. They start out looking a little bit like shawls, and they end up, I find these so amazingly wearable and comfortable. So I would wear it thusly, and it's beautiful. It's just kind of a plain cowl with then a little bit of lace edging. I will say I knit the pattern on the needle size called for, which was a US 4, and I ran out of yarn a few lines before the end. So I don't know if that's a problem with the pattern or a problem with my gauge. I did not gauge swatch. I don't normally for cowls. And I will say that the pattern called for 1 skein of sport weight yarn, and mine was exactly the same yardage, so I potentially could have been close anyway, but I did run out. I ended up a few rows early, which was fine because the last part of the chart is fairly repetitive, so I just made a couple adjustments and finished it. I am perfectly happy with it. It is a great size. I'm sure I will wear it this winter. But that is, as I said, the Rochambeau cowl by Karina Spencer. So that is another finish. The other one that I cannot remember if I had finished before I left and if I had showed this one to you is, and I think I had showed you this in process, this is a hat pattern called I think it's Variations a la Rousse, and it is a pattern that calls for fingering weight yarn doubled. I ended up knitting mine in Cascade 220, and it is a cabled beanie hat, and I just had like 3/4 of a skein, and I went ahead and knit this. This will be added to my charity hat giving, but I think I showed it to you in progress, but not at the finish. So that is finished and ready to be donated. So that is all in terms of the finished knits. Let's talk about what's on my needles. As I said, I took a million projects with me. There are other projects you have seen me work on that are not in here today. I go back and forth in my process. I cast on a million things, I work on all of them, and then I get frustrated because nothing's getting finished, and then I start to break them down and work on them one at a time. So currently I am sort of in my one at a time, although technically I have 2 that I'm working on right now, but like I'm not working on 5 different things. So, the project that I started on the road, and actually I'm going to need to rip it, I'll talk about it in a second. I was sent from Brown Sheep some lovely yarn for review. This is their Prairie Spun DK, and it is 100% wool 3-ply yarn, 100 grams, 256 yards, recommended needle size of 6. This is in the colorway Lost Lake, and it is spun and dyed by the Brown Sheep Company in Mitchell, Nebraska. And I was offered 1 or 2 skeins and the possibility of a cowl pattern, and I decided to ask for the cowl pattern. And let's see if I have, so this is called the Prairie Grass cowl and scarf. It's either a eternity loop or a scarf, and it's designed by Patricia Kelthoff, I think is how, I don't know how it's pronounced. And it is a Brown Sheep pattern, and up here in the corner you can see what it is going to look like. So I wound my first skein and I cast on. I actually cast on the way home, and I got several inches done, but I am not entirely pleased with it. I am on a US 7, which was the recommended needle size for the pattern, and I think the fabric is kind of stiff. It's not flowy, so I am going to rip this and go up to either a size 8 or a size 9, but it is a pretty simple cabled cowl, and I love the color. As you can see, it's me. I am going to do the eternity loop, and it calls for 2 skeins, although I don't know exactly how much of the 2 skeins I will use, because it does give you a length, and basically the only tricky part is you have a provisional cast on, and then you will graft them together at the end. So unfortunately I'm gonna rip this, 6 or 8 inches of work and start again, but that is my project for this week. In fact, I'll do that this evening, and that is going to accompany me to work and knit night and everywhere else. And this was just one afternoon in the car, so I'm sure I will tear along on this and have something to show you in the next couple weeks. And then I will give you a full review of the Prairie Spun DK yarn. So that is what I'm going to be working on this week as my main project. The final knit that I brought in today is something that I started this month. I don't really have any business starting it because I have several other review yarns that I need to work with, but I decided this year to splurge on a present for me, and several months ago I ordered the Opal Advent Sock Calendar. I don't know how many of you know about this. Every year Opal does an Advent Sock Calendar. Pre-orders usually open several months early. They are insanely expensive, partially for the packaging and the shipping, and then partially because they're just in such demand. But I decided this year I wanted one, and so this year's is like a little storybook, and then each day you open the door. I've opened day 1 and 2. Actually, I haven't opened day 3. I need to do that after the podcast. But I decided that this year I wanted to order one of these and then do a special project. And so I ordered one. It came quite a while ago, and on December 1st I opened my first door and started my project. I decided that I'm going to do a 10-stitch blanket, and you know what? I looked up the name of the person who wrote the 10-stitch blanket pattern so that I would be able to tell you, and of course, bad podcaster, I forgot it, and I didn't write show notes today, so I do not have the name. It will be in the show notes. But I decided she has a variety of patterns. Some of them are squares, some of them are zigzags, some of them are, what else does she have? She has squares, she has zigzags, she has a variety of 10-stitch blanket patterns, but the one I decided I liked was the round one. So I took my day 1 and started my blanket, and I just added day 2. And I will be adding day 3, and I am positive that, so here we are on day 3, and this is as far as I've gotten, only just into day 2. So I am positive that I will not be able to keep up throughout the month. I also had no business starting another blanket, but of course, I did it anyway. So this is my 10-stitch round blanket. It will just be a big round blanket, and I'm hoping to use all of the minis that come in the Opal Advent Calendar. I do reserve the right, if I dislike the colors on the mini, to not put it in there, but I still think that I will end up with quite a decent sized blanket. And then I actually have some leftover skeins of Opal sock yarns that I have used to knit myself socks. And so my thought is that I will add some of those on the outside towards the end, and I will just keep going on this until it's the size that I want it to be. So this will be my probably home project for the month of December, and just a little something fun to do with my Opal Advent Calendar. So, and I will put that in the show notes. The needles that I am using are US Signatures 2.5 millimeter, which I think is a US 1.5. These were a gift from a very dear friend of mine. They're the stiletto tip points, sorry. Let's see if I can... They are purple, and they have these beautiful, they're really nice, and I do actually like knitting with the short straight needles for this little 10-stitch, because you're knitting back and forth and then picking up one of the stitches on the edge of the previous round as you go, and they make this project a joy to knit. So I'm really, really enjoying this, and I'm excited to see where this will go. I am sure that it will take me into January or February to keep working on it. Yes, I have a bunch of other blankets going. Yes, I have a million other things I need to knit, but this was my little, this is my happy making for me knit for this month. So other projects you will see this month, I have at least one other review yarn that I hope to get to finish this month, so you'll see that in the next couple weeks. My husband's boss is having their, well, his wife is having their second child, so I will be working on that. And then I hope to pick up some of the other projects that are languishing. I have the banana leaf shawl in the Northbound Knitting metallurgy skein, that lace weight skein with the pattern in kind of knits and pearls. Kind of an oversized ribbing, almost just a textured knit. I really like that. I took that with me, did not work on a stitch of it. The other thing I have waiting on the needles is the Hitofude sweater, which I started several months ago and then put down for a variety of reasons. I would like to pick that back up and work on it. The Winter Olympics will be coming in February. I have a sweater I'd like to do for that. So I have tons of things that I have coming up, and I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. So, sip of tea real quick. This is turning into a monster podcast, which I suppose is okay because I haven't been around for a while. I don't have too much else to do. Spinning. I was spinning a braid when I left. I think I showed you. It was a Hello Yarn braid of, and I forgot to look it up. Can't remember whether it was Polworth or Falkland. It is one of the softer wools, and it is the colorway Poppet, which is purples and blues and cream colors. It reminds me of Blueberry Cobbler, kind of, because it's got like tans and a little bit of browns and some whites and then light blue and dark blue and kind of a violet. And this is, I applied it yesterday. I pulled it off the wheel this morning to skein up. It needs a good bath, and then I will take photos. This is for the shop. My guess is it is around 375 to 400 yards of, it'll probably puff up a little bit, so maybe a sport to heavy fingering weight. And if this is your colorway, keep an eye out for this because it will go up in the shop. The next spin, and actually I can say that I will be working on this imminently because today is actually a spinning Sunday. It is our holiday party, but I will be taking my wheel with me. This is called Dot. It is one of the most, it is not the most recent, but it is, was it November's color? No, it's October's color. It's October's color from the recently relaunched Southern Cross Fiber Club. It is called Dot, and it was after, I am blanking, but it's after an art form. It's after something art related. And this is kind of a poppy, orangey red, and burgundy, and browns, and tans. And I think actually it's a great color for the season. It reminds me of like holly berries. So I am going to work on this one today. It is 80% merino, 20% cashmere. So it is just absolutely luxurious. And I hope to get possibly even as much as half of the singles done today. I usually get a lot done at Spinning Sundays. So that is what will be on my wheel this week, and this one is also for the shop. So I'm going to try and eke out, I don't think I'm gonna make 13 pounds this year, which is too bad because that's my general goal, but I think I'm pretty sure Poppet puts me into, Dot will probably put me into 12 pounds. And I'm hoping to get a couple more spins out before the end of the year. So that is what I've got going on. I'm sorry I was away so long. There should no longer be any interruptions before the end of the year. I do know Christmas Eve is a Sunday, although I'll probably just podcast the day before. And we are not going anywhere. My next scheduled travel is February. So for a while, I promise I will come to you regularly on Sundays, and I have lots and lots of things I hope to get done in the next several months, which means lots and lots of things to show you. So thank you for joining me today. Again, I'm sorry about my absence. If this was your first podcast, you got to see a lot of stuff because it was a lot of weeks of absence. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you'll come back. If you joined me again today, welcome back. I'm sorry I was gone so long, and it's good to see you again. So until next week, I will say, as I always do, happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye!